So we are going to continue on with our notes about the human body systems. And we finished up last week, before vacation, we finished up with the skeletal system and muscular system. And today, we're going to start with the circulatory system. And circulatory system, you guys sort of told me in our question today, what's its purpose? Why do we need a circulatory system? It's extremely important for us to stay alive, right? If your heart is not beating, you can't live. If you lose too much blood, you can't survive. So what is it about our circulatory system that makes it so important? Yeah, that it delivers oxygen to our cells. Every cell in your body must have oxygen in order to stay alive. If they lose oxygen for a period of time, they will die. And so your circulatory system is what delivers that oxygen to all the various parts of your body. Okay? And that's its purpose, that's its function.
Wait, if you lost blood, could you get some else's blood if it wasn't the same type as yours?
Yes, we're going to talk about that towards the end of this section. Yeah, you can get a blood transfusion when they take someone else's blood and put it into you. There has to be certain precautions taken to match the proper type, but we'll learn more about that towards the end of this section. So our circulatory system, its purpose is to deliver oxygen to all of our cells, also to deliver nutrients and food, and then to remove waste products. All of our cells produce waste as part of their normal activities, and it's up to our blood to remove that waste from our cells and get rid of it, or bring it someplace to be removed. So the parts of the circulatory system are the heart, also the blood vessels like arteries, veins, and capillaries, and the blood itself. Those are the parts of the circulatory system that we're going to be studying. Okay? And so we're going to spend today basically talking just about the heart. And so I know you guys have covered the body systems in health. How much detail did you do in health? In the heart? Did you have to label like parts of the heart?
No.
Okay. So we're going to get into much more detail then. And we're going to start with a real basic sort of understanding of the heart, and then work our way up to a more complex, more realistic view of the heart. So this is obviously simplified, right? Our heart is in boxes, but this can help us understand how blood flows through our body. Okay? And so the heart itself, how many chambers in our hearts? 4 chambers. Can you name the chambers? That's not.
Yeah, I can't do that.
No? Nate, you know?
It's right atrium, left atrium, left ventricle, and right atrium.
Yeah, correct. So the 2 types of chambers are the atrium and the ventricle. And there's a right atrium and a right ventricle, and there's a left atrium, left ventricle. So those are the 4 chambers. The atrium, those are the chambers where the blood enters your heart. Like an atrium, you may have heard that word before. Like if you go into a big fancy hotel, like the main entryway is sometimes called the atrium of the hotel. It's the big, sort of lobby area where you enter the hotel. So the atrium is the entryway. So the right atrium, which is where we're going to start, its job is to collect blood from all the various parts of the body. And that blood is what we call deoxygenated. What does that mean if it's deoxygenated? It doesn't have much oxygen. Why does it not have much oxygen? Nick? Yeah, that is true. It's going to pick up new oxygen eventually. But it's low in oxygen because it just came from all the various parts of your body. So it just gave your cells oxygen. And so the blood itself, has very little oxygen at this point. But it does have a lot of what? So it's low in oxygen, high in carbon dioxide. So that blood comes into the right atrium, and from the right atrium it goes into the right ventricle. Along the way it goes through sort of a one-way valve, a one-way door that allows blood to go this way, but not backwards. So that blood that's low in oxygen, where does it need to go? If it's going to pick up new oxygen, where does that happen? In the lungs. Our lungs are where our blood takes in new oxygen and can get rid of that carbon dioxide that it had. So the right ventricle pumps that blood to the lungs. And so what's going to change about it? When that blood is at the lungs, what happens to it? What? Well, yeah, so you breathe, it connects with our respiratory system where we breathe in and out. But how does this blood change once it reaches our lungs? Soraya?
Does it like become a high?
And yes, exactly. It gets high in oxygen. It takes in, so we breathe in, oxygen from our lungs goes into our blood, and it gets oxygenated. What about carbon dioxide? Gets rid of it, and that's what we breathe out. So that happens in our lungs. It releases the carbon dioxide that the blood had, and it took in new oxygen. So this blood is sort of refreshed. It just got filled up with oxygen now. It got rid of all this waste carbon dioxide. And so it's going to return back to the heart again. But it doesn't come onto the right side of the heart, it comes into the left side of the heart. So the left side of the heart picks up that blood from the lungs. Okay? And that blood is oxygenated. It's high in oxygen, low in carbon dioxide. Again, it goes through a valve, a one-way door that only allows blood to go from the atrium to the ventricle. And then once it's in this left ventricle, that chamber, its purpose is to pump that blood to the body.
So it's just like a cycle.
Yes. And so when it goes to the body, this blood, what does it give the cells of your body? Tatum? Gives them oxygen. This oxygen picked up in the lungs, once it gets to your cells, it gives them that oxygen. What does it take away from your cells? CO2, carbon dioxide, because that's a waste product. So the blood gives up oxygen and nutrients, and it takes in carbon dioxide and other waste. And when we say body, that this blood goes to your body, we mean every part of your body. That blood is going to your brain cells. It's going to cells in your feet, in your digestive system, in your heart itself, in your fingers. This blood is going all over. Every cell in your body is surrounded by blood vessels. So that's what we mean when we just say body in general. And then finally, where does this blood need to go after it's given up oxygen? It's gained carbon dioxide. Where's it headed? Natalie? Eventually, where's it have to stop first? Back to the heart here. Then it's going to go through. Then it's going to go to the lungs. So it returns back to the heart again, and we've completed a cycle. Back into the right side, and then the whole process repeats. This blood's going to go to the lungs, get recharged, go back to the heart, get pumped to the body, give up the oxygen, and repeat. So heart, lungs, heart, body, over and over and over again. Our heart beats about once every second or so. Okay? Might take a minute or 2 minutes for blood to make a complete loop through that cycle. Yeah. So that's the overview. We didn't really name any parts here, but we have the idea about where the blood is going.
This one is to veins.
Yes. Yeah. Now, why am I using different colors?
So you can tell the difference.
Yeah, so you can tell which blood is oxygenated and which is deoxygenated. But people sometimes have the mistaken view. Is deoxygenated blood blue? No, but many people will say it is. It's not, though. That's incorrect. Even though a lot of people say that, it's incorrect. Deoxygenated blood is not blue. There is a change in color, though. So blood that's high in oxygen is very bright red. Like if you think about, you got a cut and you see blood, that's oxygenated blood. It's bright red. When blood gives up its oxygen and it's still within our veins, it's a darkish purple sort of color. It's not blue, though. It's a darker red.
I once wanted to get like blood work because like it wasn't like I don't know, but like when they took the blood work, like it was the blood was like dark red.
Mhm.
Is that what they're like meant to do because like the oxygen blood moved it?
Well, no, they are taking that blood from a vein. A vein is, we'll talk about in a minute, but a veins carry blood back to your heart. And so probably they were using like a vacuum tube, so there's no air in the syringe that they're taking the blood from. So, because if you get a cut, even if you cut, like I cut my hand here, these are veins on the surface of my hand, and it would still bleed bright red because as soon as the blood hits the air, it's going to get oxygen. But in that case, if they're withdrawing blood, there may be a vacuum in there, and so there's no oxygen, so the blood comes out much darker.
It's like a
Yeah,
tube,
yeah,
like a needle.
yeah. All right. So now let's get a little more realistic. Okay, and again, right side of the heart carries deoxygenated blood, left side carries oxygenated blood generally, and then the body and the lungs are where it changes from one to the other. So now we're a little more realistic in terms of what the heart's looking like. And we're going to name some of these parts. Okay. So first of all, we have arteries and veins. You could write this in there. That would be helpful, yeah. So arteries and veins are two types of blood vessels in our bodies. And the difference between them, or one difference in what they do, arteries carry the blood away from your heart. Any blood vessel that's carrying the blood and it's leaving your heart, going somewhere else, it's called an artery. What do you think veins are then? They carry the blood back to your heart. If the blood's headed back towards your heart, that's a vein that's carrying it. So I tell people, remember, A in artery goes with away. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. So let's name our chambers. What chamber is this? Right atrium. Somebody else, raise your hand, please. What chamber is this? Nate? That's the right ventricle. How about up here? What chamber is that? Ari? That's the left atrium. And down here? Nick? Left ventricle. Now remember, you imagine anatomy as if it's inside of the animal and you're looking into them. So if this were my heart, okay, it's my right hand, it's my right atrium and right ventricle on my right side. But when you look at it, it appears to be on the left of the paper. All right, so we start here. You're going to have blue arrows because this is deoxygenated blood. Comes into the right atrium. From there, it moves down into the right ventricle. And then it's going to get pumped through this tube. Now, is this tube an artery or a vein? Why is it an artery? You're correct. I don't know.
It's bringing blood
As long as it draws air.
Haley?
It's bringing blood to the lungs.
Know all that? You're on the right track, but don't mention the lung. It's an artery because blood's going away from the heart. All right, let's take a second here. This artery has a special name. It's called something, a word that means having to do with the lungs. Does anyone know CPR or been taught CPR? Okay. Do you know what CPR stands for? Well, do you know what CPR is?
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Like, just describe it.
You like, for someone like joking, like, press on your chest and whatever they're joking.
That's sort of mixing up two different things a little bit. Natalie?
When you do it, it helps them breathe.
Yeah, it's CPR is what you do if a person has no pulse and is not breathing. You can do CPR to help try to keep them alive until their heart restarts. Because if your heart's not pumping, you can't survive. And so there's two parts of giving a person CPR. Two separate things you do. You know, what is one of them?
Like where you like pump their chest.
Yeah, they're called chest compressions, where you stand over a person with your palms on their chest and you compress and push on their chest every second or so. And what you're doing when you do CPR like that is you're squeezing their heart. It's not contracting on its own, but as you squeeze it, it moves the blood along a little bit. So that's moving their blood along. What is the other part of CPR, James? Mouth to mouth. And that's called rescue breathing. As you breathe into somebody's mouth, you're inflating their lungs with air so that their blood can become oxygenated. So you're sort of acting as their lungs and their heart by doing chest compressions, then doing a couple rescue breaths to inflate their lungs so that you can get oxygen into their blood and you can move that blood around their body, and oftentimes it can help keep a person alive if their heart's not beating on its own. Connor?
We should be putting CO2 into them.
Yeah, you are putting some extra CO2 in there. But the air you exhale has CO2 in it, but it also still has plenty of oxygen that somebody else can absorb it. Like even if you had a plastic bag and you breathe in and out of it, you could continue to absorb oxygen from that air a couple times. Because you exhale, you don't use all the oxygen when you breathe in air. You exhale a mixture of gases. So the reason I bring up CPR, okay, so what do the letters stand for? Do you know what the C in CPR stands for? No? Cardio. That's your pushing on the chest. You know what the P stands for?
Physical?
Pulmonary. Pulmonary means having to do with the lungs. And then the R is resuscitation. So I bring all that up because I want you to know pulmonary means having to do with the lungs. So this artery, where is this blood headed? To the lungs. It's called the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary because it's going to the lungs. Artery because it's going away from the heart.
They do the same on the other side.
What's that?
Like the same stuff to the other side.
What was your question?
Like, do you do like the pulmonary artery to the other side too?
No, we'll talk about that in a minute. So this blood goes to the lungs. What happens there? Gets oxygen. Gets rid of CO2. And then where is it going to head back to? Back to the heart. So comes from the lungs, comes in this way. Is that an artery or vein? That's a vein. It's coming from the lungs. So what do you think it's going to be called? What vein is that? Pulmonary vein, correct, because it's coming from the lungs. Pulmonary vein. All right, that blood comes in to the left atrium. Now it's oxygenated. Goes through a valve into the left ventricle. And then it's going to get pumped out. Where is this blood headed? all throughout your body. Is this an artery or a vein? It's an artery, and it has a special name. It's the largest artery in our body that leaves our heart. It's this really, really thick, really big artery. It's called the aorta.
Could you live without an artery?
No. So this is the aorta. It loops around and it has these branches off of it that send the blood to all the various parts of our body.
By biggest, you mean like the widest or longest?
Widest.
So why do they look at, they're just the same on the screen?
Yeah, this is not inaccurate. You'll see in the next one it's clearer.
Wait, would you say a heart has like equal sides? 'Cause
Not really. In this diagram, it's drawn that way. This is what the heart actually looks like, though. So not quite equal. The left ventricle is the largest chamber. This is a real heart. So this is what it really looks like. This is a model of a human heart. I'll pass it around. You can see it's not a, it's not a nice little perfect shape like this. That's not the actual shape of a heart. Okay, it's more like this. It's complex and it has all these veins and arteries attached to it. Tomorrow I'll show you a real heart that I have. But this is the sort of diagram you're going to have to know and be able to label. And we've already talked about almost every numbered part on this. We're just going to look at it now in a more realistic drawing. This is like if you took a heart and you sliced it in half and we're looking into it, this is sort of what you would see. All right, so again, the chambers. The right atrium and right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Okay? So you can see that the heart is sort of almost tilted. So you have the two atrium on top, which receive blood, and then the two ventricles below. The ventricles are bigger, stronger chambers because they have to pump the blood out. The atrium just has to receive the blood. Okay, so let's again trace the path of blood. Remembering, arteries bring blood away from the heart, veins bring that blood to the heart. Yeah, you already wrote it once. You could write it again if you want, but as long as you know arteries bring blood away from the heart, that's what's important. Is that an artery or vein? This and this. I hear both. I hear murmurings of both. Who can tell me for sure what is this? Arteries or veins? Why? Because blood's coming to the heart. This is the largest vein in the body. Okay? On this heart, let's see this for a second, please. On this heart, okay? One goes in here, one goes up here. This is that vein. Okay? So if this were my body, this is part of it, this is part of it. It's called the Vena Cava. Where's that blood coming from that's heading into the right atrium? Where is it coming from? From the body. So the one coming from above, this one would take all the blood from my brain and my head and my arms would come in that way. This one on the bottom would take all the blood from my abdomen and both of my legs. That would come in and come into the right atrium through the bottom. Okay? So all that blood comes in through this vena cava. From there it moves down into the right ventricle. It gets pumped up. Where'd this leave up? Gets pumped up. Where's this blood headed to? To the lungs. Is this an artery or vein? What's the name of it? Why is it pulmonary artery? It's going to the lungs. So the blood goes up there. Now, why is it split off like that? Yeah. Oh, so this is headed to where? The right Lung, right? This blood's headed to the lungs. This one is bringing blood to the left lung. So we have two lungs. And that's why there's two branches of that pulmonary artery. Technically, they'd be called the right and left pulmonary artery, but that's fine for now. Pulmonary artery. What's going to happen to that blood when it gets to the lungs? What's going to happen to the blood? But first, what happens when it actually reaches the lungs? The blood changes. It gets oxygenated, gets rid of its carbon dioxide. And then it's going to head back into the heart again. It comes in through these. Are these arteries or veins? Veins. What's the name of those veins? Where are they coming from? The lungs. So they are pulmonary veins. So it comes in through here and into this left atrium. Why are there two sides coming in? From the right lung and left lung. The blood goes down into the left ventricle. Then it gets pumped through this. Is this an artery or vein? Artery. This is the big one. What's it called? Aorta. So these little branches, if you on this heart, the aorta, okay, comes up, it arches around, it sort of loops around, and then comes down here. These little things you see coming off, those are branches that lead to other arteries. Okay, this one leads down the right arm. Then one goes up and brings the blood up to your head, your brain. The other one brings the blood down to your left arm. And then the aorta continues behind the heart, and this is what brings blood to your lower body. Okay? So it's all that blood's headed to all the various parts of your body. Last one. The septum is the muscular wall that separates the heart into its two halves, its right and left side. Haley?
When you tip upside down, why does the blood stop pumping?
It doesn't stop. But more of the blood settles in your head because of gravity. Okay, so your heart continues to pump, will continue to pump blood, and blood will still get back into your heart, but more slowly. Let's look at this for a minute. You don't have this slide or anything. I'm going to just ask a few questions. Raise your hand, please, if you could answer this. What chamber is this? Raise your hand if you could answer this question. The name of this chamber, Matt. That's the left ventricle. The name of this chamber. Nate? Left atrium. The name of this chamber, Nick?
Right atrium.
Correct. This chamber, Abby?
Right ventricle.
Right ventricle, good. Is this an artery or a vein? That's a vein. It's bringing the blood back into the heart. What's it called? It has a special name. No? Not this one. Vena Cava. Where's this blood headed? Is this an artery or vein? Artery. What's its name? Pulmonary artery. Are these arteries or veins? Raise your hand, please. Don't just say it out loud. Are these arteries or are these veins? Zach? Those are veins. What are their names? They're pulmonary veins. Where is this? What is this called? The loop. Matt? Aorta. Is it an artery or vein? It's an artery. Finally, this is what the heart and lungs look like. This is from that bodies exhibit. This is preserved, the lungs and the heart all in one.